Hello folks, Guy here again. Welcome to my home on this very beautiful autumn day. I've done a video like this one before where I mentioned some of the things I'm going to bring up again here. But you know, some things are definitely worth re-mentioning, okay? The name of this video is called Why Guy Explains Accursed. Now, those who know your Bibles at all very well, you'll recall the most famous or infamous verse that Paul is quoted by saying something along the lines of, if anyone, shares with you or teaches you anything different, whether he be an angel or whoever it may be, anything different than what I'm teaching you, let him be accursed. Now, I want to share in that context, in his definition there, what I believe, what all that means. Okay? So this message is to and for and about Christians who I believe have an ironic, and I'll explain that irony in a moment, have an ironic understanding about the Bible and the gospel that Paul preached, all right, as well as Jesus. So I now it's almost sardonically, I don't know if you can say that at the same time as saying I now bust a gut, with the irony when I read and I hear a statement like, you are not saved. Okay? If I were to just blindly go along with the modern traditional Christian teaching of hell, and being saved means being saved from hell, then I'd have no choice but to agree with that statement. You are not saved, because they believe the vast majority of people are going to hell. Right? I'm not reaching here, right? But consider how the verse that I'm about to read, it points out a huge problem that has never been addressed within modern traditional Christian circles. It just hasn't. And Romans 11:26, it says, and so all, not some, so all Israel will be saved, as it is written. Read the chapter, and you're going to realize that this verse is self-contextualizing, meaning it doesn't matter who it was written to and what it was, anything. The context, it doesn't change the fact that all of Israel will be saved. So this verse is self-contextualizing. So now listen up, modern traditional Christian circles, those of you who might be watching this video, which probably none will. Jews don't believe in hell. Okay, yet this verse points out that all of Israel, Jews, will be saved. So obviously being saved in this verse has absolutely nothing to do with hell. I never hear about that in teachings, modern teachings. Come on, folks. I'm not reaching here. I'm really not at all. You need more evidence? Jesus was a Jew, and he never mentioned hell in his good news gospel definition. Not even once. So how about a little more evidence? The Apostle Paul never mentioned hell in his gospel message or anywhere else within his 13 letters. So if you're mentioning hell in your gospel message, you're preaching a different gospel than the one Paul preached. And what did he say about it? And according to Paul, you're accursed. As simple as that. Okay, those are his words, not mine. Because you're the one that's preaching a different gospel than Paul, not me. Okay? So I hope you're catching that. So what is accursed? That's a very valid question. Now we're getting down to where the rubber meets the road, as well as the irony that I mentioned earlier. It's just ironic. This whole thing is. Maybe you'll see it too. Since I no longer believe being saved has anything whatsoever to do with hell, then the big $1 million question has to be, what did Jesus mean when he spoke about being saved? Here's the answer. It's a verb. Verb saved, used with object. I'm just reading the definitions. To be vivified. Vivifying. Okay, now this is in context when Jesus was speaking of it. 1, to give life. Does that sound like what Jesus would say? To animate, to quicken, to enliven, brighten, sharpen. I now have to ask, does this definition that I just gave you, a vivified life, explaining being saved, go along beautifully with Jesus' statement, I have come to give life, and that life more abundantly? to give life more animated, to give life more quickened, to give life that's more enlivened, more brightened, more sharpened. Does that sound like something Jesus wants to give us? Think about this, okay? That's what abundant life is. I also have to ask, does this definition go along beautifully with what Jesus said was the good news? You know, read it again. You decide if it does. Now, I want to digress just for a moment here. The perfect love of God casts out fear. I quoted that verse out of 1 John. Notice it didn't say all fear, as in fear of like getting a cold or the extreme fear of being murdered or something along those lines, right? So fear of what then? Well, the answer is this: fear of retribution. It says it right in the verse. Fear of retribution and punishment from God. It describes itself in that verse. Read it again. You know, I can't help but to conclude, in closing this video, to conclude that being accursed means not to have an animated, quickened, enlivened, bright, sharpened life. Okay? Because that's what I believe Jesus referred to being saved means. So, being accursed, to me, would be kind of the opposite of that. So, and here's the icing on the cake, if you want to call it that. On top of all of that, to be burdened with a fear, the opposite of what the 1 John verse says, to be burdened with the fear of retribution or punishment from God for myself or for my loved ones, and even for the whole anybody in the whole world, since the vast majority of them are going to hell. Are you catching this? So being accursed is actually, ironically, what Christendom promotes without even realizing it. That's the irony of this whole thing. And the reason they tell people to share the gospel is to save them from hell. What this does, this puts people under an horrendous burden that it's your fault if people go to hell. Don't tell me you haven't heard that kind of teaching before, because I know you have. So simply put, a belief in hell actually endorses and defines a person who is accursed. Are you going to actually tell me that you're living a vivifying, quickened life, animated and enlivened and brightened and sharpened, while being in fear of going to hell? Are you going to go through all that enlivened, animated, quickened, enlivened, brightened, sharpened life, vivified, wonderful life, fear of your loved ones going to hell? Are you actually going to claim that and stand on that? I don't think so. You're accursed. So the amazing irony is, as I pointed out, as per the definition of being saved, most modern traditional Christians are not saved, but they're accursed. That's ironic. You see, folks, I'm not trying to get unbelievers saved from hell with doing these videos. My attempt is to get believers saved by explaining and offering a vivifying life that Jesus said is ours. But you cannot endorse and promote something that robs you of that. It's as simple as that. Because you cannot tell me a belief in hell offers you an animated, quickened, enlivened, brightened, sharpened life. It doesn't. It does the opposite. Judge it. Judge the fruit. Well, thank you for viewing.